Buckle up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by Natso. Now, here are your hosts, Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and I'm here with my co-host, Darren Schulte. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. You're listening to The Truck Stops Here, Natso's podcast. Today, we are delighted to have Alex Williams, Chief Operating Officer at Jiffy Trip. Hi, Alex.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
We've been trying to get Alex on the podcast actually for quite a bit because there's just so many exciting things happening with you guys. One thing that you guys were certainly ahead of the game on was the self-checkout and drive-thru. Can you talk about why you chose those and any adjustments you had to make this year given what's going on in the world?
Absolutely. So self-checkout and a drive-thru were differentiating points for us that we thought we could use to compete in our areas. We debuted these about 2 years ago in our first new concept store. We've been putting 2 self-checkouts in each store that we've been building recently, along as well as a drive-thru. And we have seen the impact of those grow over time, in that I believe the adoption on self-checkouts is slow. And one of our biggest issues that we deal with drive-thru is just creating the awareness of it. And
right.
So I think, those are some things we put those in to try to, like I said, differentiate ourselves and give people another option for, how do you want to shop? How do you want to pay? How do you want to interact within our store? So that was really, the reason behind it.
Do you see an acceleration of use this year?
We have, especially in our drive-thru. I think we were running at about 7 or 8% of our total sales through our drive-thru, and that's gone up to about 13% recently, which is great. And so self-checkout, COVID really didn't move the needle much there for us, but definitely our drive-thru was impacted.
Interesting. I know I always feel, at least right now, more comfortable with self-checkout. I know drive-thrus, Darren, I know you sometimes advise, sometimes you don't. Having drive-thrus?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask Alex, if you were going to advise a new travel center about whether or not they should put in a drive-thru, what would you tell them is like one of the main things that they have to be aware of before they put a drive-thru in their travel center?
The complexity of the drive-thru is a lot bigger than what it can be, depending on what services, products you want to offer through the drive-thru. We really went into it offering everything within the store, and that's changing for us. We're having to pare some of that back now and realize that drive-thru is all about speed and efficiency. And if you're offering everything within the store, including made-to-order food, that can really drive your ticket times up, create frustration with your customers. And then the drive-thru is, not the convenience that we were trying to initially build around. So, I think, Darren, you and I had conversations a couple of years ago whenever we were first looking at this, and it was something that you had told us to look at and make sure we understood. And we tested something, and now we're trying to pull it back a little bit and figure out how do we drive more cars, with better ticket times. So that's something we're working on right now.
I think that's really wise what you're doing because, a lot of times it's just like fueling a truck. There's always a belief that it takes X amount of time for, a vehicle to go through the drive-through, or it takes X amount of time for a truck to fuel. And in busy locations, everyone forgets about, how long does it take that third or fourth person in line in a drive-through, and or in the case of a truck, how long does it take that third truck in a line to fuel? And COVID, I think, has given folks patience for the most part, but whenever this disease does leave us, I think what you guys are doing is very, very, very bright, and that is focus on improving those speeds, because people will soon begin to lose patience again once they can walk inside.
100% agree. One thing, really the biggest change that we're making is taking made-to-order food away from the drive-through. But we've been waiting. We're getting ready to roll out our mobile app that has food ordering and really turn that drive-through into a pickup destination for food that was ordered ahead, paid for ahead of time. And it's just, the convenience of passing it through the window and everything else that we need to be able to do. We need to be able to do really in 90 seconds or less from the time they pull up to that window, whether it's beer, fountain drinks, cigarettes, snacks. We need to be able to hit that 90-second mark to be efficient.
That's fantastic.
I was reading about your new concept stores, which I think you have 2 now. Is that right?
2, and getting ready to open a 3rd in January.
Awesome. Well, it was described as big and bright, which is totally up my alley. Can you tell us why you think that's important? Big and bright.
Absolutely. So, we are trying to really target families, moms, whatever that is. We got to get the families within the store, because they are a critical component to our business. And some of the things we're doing, is a family restroom or something like that to bring them in. But people are just drawn to bright things, new things, nice things. And, I've said this before, that your outside visual appearance will create an expectation for what your customer will receive when they come inside your store. And so the outside has to be big, tall, bright, well manicured to lay out, that value that your customer is going to expect when they go in the store.
Absolutely. I know we always say, and Darren always says, which is true, and at my family too, that the women in the family decide where they stop. And I know that's certainly what I look for.
Yeah, and there is a huge advantage that we see, and we learned some of this whenever I think we had went on your Not So truck stop tour up through Nebraska and Iowa, and saw what others were doing. And I don't. One thing is, I don't think you can have too much light or too many light fixtures on a store to make it brighter. And whether that's, we're doing some stadium lights out in our parking lot, shining off the fuel canopies to even fill up some of those dead areas. But if you really go look at the best of the best, they have unbelievable amounts of lighting, both inside and outside, to give you that really bright parking lot, make you feel safe at the fuel pumps or inside the store at night or even during the day.
Absolutely.
Alex, I think that's a fantastic statement because, the best in class operators, convenience stores, travel centers, you feel as safe in shopping at those and stopping at those places at nighttime as you do during the day. And it's, especially for travel centers, it's quite amazing often to see travel centers, let's say 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, look almost like they're closed because they have not paid proper attention to the lighting. Or maybe their store is well lit inside, but the outside is super dark. And again, they often forget families, traveling with children, single mothers traveling, or single fathers. There is an issue of safety when it's, has to do with your family. And if you're not comfortable stopping at a location, it's often because it feels unsafe, and it's due to lighting in most cases.
Well, and I think there's 2 things. If you're talking about retrofitting a site, updating or upgrading to LED is just a no-brainer. Not only does it give you more brightness, but there's also an ROI involved with, electricity savings with it. When building a site, it is not a good place to try to save money, and cutting down on lighting. Really, the more the better. Gives you an advantage over competitors, especially if you can be a little bit brighter than them.
Okay, can you tell us about the H2O cave?
Sure. So we took this concept, not going to try to claim the invention, but we had went and stole it off of somebody that we thought did a really good job with it. And we've put this in the last couple of stores. It is about a 12 foot by 12 foot refrigerated cave that has a single door entry for both vendors, employees, and customers. Really, it's similar to the type of shelving that you would get in a beer cave or some of your back stock in your walk-in. And we put basically all of our multi-pack, whether it's cases of water, 12 packs of pop, 2 liters of pop. We've even done, some flavored sparkling water, experimented with that. Juice boxes, cases of juice boxes for moms taking their kids to soccer or basketball that have to grab something. So we think it gives us an advantage over others that may not have that ability to refrigerate. Maybe take some of that dollar store or grocery store market that, hey, I forgot to stop and pick up, drinks for the soccer game, and I don't have time to put them in the refrigerator. Well, Jiffy Trip has that, and it's already cold and ready to go. So that was our reasoning behind taking that idea and kind of putting our own little twist on it.
Have you guys seen an increase this year? Because I know that was sales of water was one of the trends identified by Coca-Cola on an earlier podcast.
So we have one thing we figured out is we built the second one larger than the first, and it was a great idea because we didn't build it big enough to begin with. And case water is typically the biggest struggle that we have in keeping stocked. Mm-hmm. But we also have to, it's not the only place within the store to find cases of water, but it's the only place to find cold cases of water. We still have to have a secondary location for a lot of those products, just due to delivery schedules or stocking. But yeah, we see it a lot with work crews in the morning. Mm-hmm. They pop in and they really do appreciate the fact that they don't have to go buy a bag of ice and throw it in the cooler. So there's definitely some advantages for us, and we have seen that increase.
Okay. Well, on the flip side, beer is having a moment this year as the nation leans into the sin categories. Can you tell us about your beer caves and your philosophy there? Absolutely.
So same thing we talked about with the hydration cave in mm-hmm. that we cannot build it big enough. The bigger that we build it, the better. And we have taken a concept from others in doing kind of an open air craft beer section that is about 14 foot in length, and it is doing extremely well. So we were not big in the craft beer business before, mm-hmm. but we are glad that we went into it. For those that have it, it is a much better profit margin item than going with some of the mainline beers. You may be getting 12 to 15% on, some of the main lines, but it's not unusual to get closer to 20% on craft beer. And people are looking for something different. So the one lesson we learned is you cannot build a big enough beer cave. If you think you have enough space, just make it just a little bit bigger, because it's hard to go retrofit after the fact.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this, Darren and I, that everyone's sort of looking for that spark of joy wherever they can get it this year. And so if it's, finding something new that you haven't tried before, I totally get that.
it's definitely been the year of alcohol sales. It's even looking at just the day part. It is no longer a 5 o'clock on the way home. During COVID, it was a 10 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. People aren't working, kids aren't in school, and so we learned a lot from it, and understood that maybe we didn't have quite enough space in the beer cave, even though we thought we had it.
Alex, do you think some of the purchasing habits that people have picked up related to beer will continue after COVID? Like you've referenced the beer in the afternoon, so the beer and the sandwich. In a lot of cultures, that's a lot of the world, it's not uncommon to grab a beer and a sandwich right during your lunch break. Do you think some of those habits will remain potentially even after once folks are back at work more often and or COVID begins to go to the wayside?
There has to be some normalization at some point, and I don't know where that will land. I don't know that anybody knows that, but it's probably somewhere in between what we saw in COVID and what we saw before COVID. In that obviously people probably developed some different habits personally and culturally. And so I've been surprised more. I think even our culture is, I see more people grabbing a beer or something in the afternoon with something else versus, years back, it was always cases of beer that you were selling. And singles have really been something that has grown. I know that's may not be entirely applicable to the truck stop industry as much, but in the C-store industry, man, the single business, just the varieties has really taken off, especially in Oklahoma. We didn't have High Point beer until a little over 2 years ago. And so that's a little bit newer segment for us, but I'm seeing it grow more and more, the singles that are being bought in the middle of the day.
That's another great point that you're bringing up, because traditionally in the travel centers, as you're aware of and you've heard, we don't really sell a lot of beer traditionally. Now, again, there's always exceptions. You're close to a racetrack or a football field or a lake or something, but in general, that's never been a really high selling item for us in general. However, a lot of folks have reported, even though they weren't selling, this is pre-COVID, beer per se in cases, they noticed a huge uptick in their single sales. And this was pre-COVID-19. And a lot of the members are reporting similar comments to what you're saying, is that they are seeing significant increases in the single beer category. There are a lot of travel center members out there that are actually experimenting with essentially just selling singles, becoming a single beer store mixed with the traditional beer lines as well as the craft beers, and having quite good sales. In fact, some folks have essentially gone the way of eliminating the cases of beers. And again, these are travel centers, truck stops, but just selling the singles and having great success with that. So it's really interesting to hear you say that about your own location, that those particular single SKUs are picking up, because that does match what most travel center and truck stop operators are referencing.
And I think it'll be interesting to see, because I think when people were out of work, kids were out of school, that probably led to the biggest part of that increase, or the reason behind it. And I think as every month goes on, more people are getting back to work, more kids are going back to school. And does that phase away or phase out, or does it continue in some manner? So it'll be a really good observation for us to watch over the next 6 months.
Perfect segue to my last question, which is, what is next for Jiffy Trip?
What is next for Jiffy Trip? Well, we really have two goals in mind. We have 29 locations across northern Oklahoma right now. Our growth area is going to be more in the residential C-stores. We do operate some truck stops, but those 29 locations, we want to be at 50 by the year 2025, and our goal is to have 100 multi-state locations by the end of the decade. So we're still experimenting with some of our new concept stores and changing some things. We've tried things. We've done some things well. Other things have failed, and we move on, make changes, and we've done a good job of adapting over the last couple of years and learning some lessons to help us get ready to take off and hopefully build a bunch of stores over the next decade.
All right. Well, before you leave, can I ask you a few fun questions?
Absolutely.
I like to surprise people with these. We call this our fast fill episode. Okay. There's 5 questions. What is your go-to on the road snack?
Ooh, beef jerky.
Get that one a lot. Okay. Let's say you're stuck at a truck stop in a snowstorm. How do you pass the time?
Ooh. Man, that is tough. You did not email me that question ahead of time.
I know. I don't like to. I like them to be surprised.
Listen to a podcast in the car.
Perfect. Okay. Do you like to ride or drive?
Drive 1,000%.
Okay. How do you take your truck stop coffee?
Black with a little bit of stevia in it.
Okay. And lastly, a controversial question. Is it truck stop, travel center, or travel plaza?
Travel center.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today. It was really great having you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at natso.com/podcast. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you have any questions, we hope you'll reach out. You can get us at editor@natso.com. Goodbye.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by Natso, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by Natso in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.